And I guess there was a second song that we didn't do that, so I'm like, oh, that's my fault. I got up too quick, didn't I? We're off to a good start today. Hey, I just want to welcome everybody today. If you're here and you don't know anybody, don't feel bad because nobody else does it. There's a bunch of friends in here we don't normally see. This is the time of year when a lot of our members leave and they go somewhere else. And then you all come in and visit family here. So you can feel right at home. Just, if nobody knows anybody, no, it's a feel. All right, it's great to have you here this morning. And we've been on a series the last couple weeks where we've been talking about different characteristics in Jesus, in what makes Jesus tick. And so a couple weeks ago, we did one on intentional. And we were actually going to continue today in the series, but we decided to take a little detour today. And I'll tell you more about that in a minute. But let's go ahead and have a prayer first. Father, thank you for just the time to be here together, be with each other. And Father, just thank you for this time of the holidays, to be with family. I pray that you'll be with each one of us here, God. Help us to meet our needs with family. Help us to just have a great time here together today. God, I pray that your Spirit will be working powerfully in spite of me, in spite of, Father, the sinner that I am. And yet, Father, I pray that you will put all that aside and your Spirit will deliver the message today that needs to be delivered. God, be with us. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. So I'm definitely, Joe, I'm not on for sure. So I don't know if that's...
He's got the seat here.
Maybe it's just this little boxes all back here. Is it on three? There we are. I think I might be out of batteries on this, so I may go back to normal voice in a minute. Anyway, we've been doing this series looking inside the mind of Jesus. What did he think? What were his goals? What does he want us to know? But this past week, before I get into that, I want to tell you we got the privilege of spending the week with our grandkids up in New York. That was a lot of fun. That's why I've come back with this frog in my throat. It's my annual cold I get at Thanksgiving. I'll need my water here. And so because of that, we're shortening up the sermon this morning because I don't know how long I'm going to be able to go. And also, I kind of want to go in a little bit different direction with it. We were going to talk today about the unpredictability aspect of Jesus. And I realized, that's what we were going to do. We'll do that next week. So if you like what you hear and you want to come back and hear more about it next week, that would be the time to do it. It's not that Jesus himself was unpredictable. It's that people had a hard time figuring out what Jesus was going to do. Jesus knew exactly what Jesus was going to do, but other people had a hard time predicting what he was going to do. So we'll hit that next week. But today I wanted to kind of do a couple things. Because we're entering into the holidays, it's a time of distraction. Would you agree with that? I'm feeling a little distracted myself. Again, just coming off the week up in New York, I feel like everything is just it's in a state of disarray. And, it's a combination of the travel, the change in climate, the eating. How many of you overate for Thanksgiving? Did anybody actually overeat? I was actually pretty good this time. I didn't do that, but normally I do overeat. But all of those things contribute to kind of messing up our holidays because when we get it, our routines get messed up. We get kind of, we're kind of all over the place, right? So today I want to talk about a couple things, really two things, that I think will help us focus as we go into the holidays, as 2017 winds down, and 2018 is right around the corner, and of course all of the New Year's resolutions and all those kind of things. But it's like, okay, what simple things can we think about as we get ready for the holidays? And so today's message is about being one-on-one. It's not the kind of friendly one-on-one that we see here between Venus and Serena Williams. Their friendship with each other is pretty famous. And so famous that, they're best friends. and whenever they play each other, one of them or the other of them obviously is going to win the match. The other one congratulates the one that won. The loser congratulates the winner for winning. You know, it's almost like there's no real competition between the two of them. You know, there's no sibling rivalry that's a bad thing. And so this is typical of, you know, one of them has just won the match and the other one is congratulating. They played each other. But this is a different kind of one-on-one that I'm talking about. It looks more like this. You know, it's a bloody beatdown kind of one-on-one. This particular middleweight match, I don't even know who these guys are, but it ended up in a draw. And it went the full thing, and it ended a draw. They beat each other into a bloody pulp, and it ended up a draw. But it's that kind of match that we're in. So I want to think about a couple things here. A few weeks ago, we looked at something called the one thing. Do you remember that? The one thing. Do you remember what the one thing was? Don't remember. That's fine. I'm going to tell you what it is. I'm going to remind you what it is. There's one thing that we have to focus on and base our lives on that the Bible is pretty much summed up in. And it's this verse over in Mark chapter 12, verse 30. Let's go look at that. Mark 12, you have a Bible with you, or an iPad or whatever you've got. Let's boot up the Bible, open the pages. Mark chapter 12, verse 30. It's a very simple verse. Somebody asked Jesus, what is the greatest commandment? In Mark chapter 12, verse 30, he says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. Now that's a lot wrapped up in a single verse. Because when you think about what that means, he says, you think about loving the Lord your God with all your heart. It's like being on the field of battle and playing your heart out, right? And leaving everything out there. Regardless of what obstacles might be put in front of you, this verse says you're supposed to love the Lord your God with all your heart. In other words, to leave it all out on the field. Some of you guys that play sports regularly, you know what that's like. You leave it, or gals, you leave it all out there. You don't keep anything back. That's playing with all your heart. And then he says you think about with all your soul. When I think about this, playing with all your soul, or loving God with all your soul, is about thinking about the eternal side of things, and not just the here and now. Not just the temporary side. It's not just about how can I be comfortable right now, or how can I get by right now. If I'm loving God with all my soul, it's about loving God for eternity and thinking about the eternal part of things. Not just what's going to give me pleasure right now, but what in the long term am I living for? Amen. Living with all my soul. And then you think about mind. Being fully engaged. Using every sense of awareness and every sense of thinking, every part of your intellect that you have, and putting everything into it. And sometimes the holidays can mess these things up, right? Because you've got all these other things to think about. I got to think about all the preparation for family. But he says, loving the Lord with all of your mind is putting everything you've got in your mind into it also. And then finally, all of your strength. To be at the end and to be exhausted. Again, like being on the field of battle. And I'll tell you what I think about. I think about these four things. Heart, soul, mind, and strength. For some reason, the vision I have is the end of a Tough Mudder race. I've seen people when they do a Tough Mudder race, and they come back from it, and they are completely exhausted. It takes every part of your intellect to do what my son-in-law regularly does these Tough Mudder races. And it takes every part of your mind working because you got to figure things out. It takes, every part of your being, every part of your soul, all of your strength is gone by the end of it. All of your heart, you literally can't do anymore. I love the sign on the background. No quit in here. You give everything you have, and you leave it all out there, and you somehow stumble across the finish line. And that is what that race is all about. But then, think about these three questions. What drives you as a person? As you go into the end of 2017, have you ever stopped to think and ponder what it is that drives you as a person? Here's another one like it. How do you define success in life? How do you define it? Who are you closest to and why? Think about those three questions. Just to pause from the madness of all the things we've got to get done for now and the next few weeks. How would you answer those questions? We looked at something else a few weeks ago. I don't know if you remember this. The lion never sleeps. We talked about what that meant. The lion never sleeps. He's always on the prowl. The African lion is the most fearsome hunting machine, killing machine in nature. He is always on the prowl and he's always hunting for the next meal. So much so that the Bible makes this analogy. Go over to 1 Peter chapter 5. 1 Peter 5. 1 Peter 5, verse 6. It says, "Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time he may exalt you, casting all your anxieties on him, because he cares for you. Be sober-minded and be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. Resist him firm in your faith, knowing that the same kinds of suffering are being experienced by your brotherhood throughout the world." So there's the analogy that 1 Peter talks about, is that Satan prowls around like a roaring lion. Satan is stalking every one of us here. I've seen more evidence in this church in the last couple of weeks, in this group of people, and maybe it's some of you that are visiting, that Satan is constantly stalking us. Kind of like this picture. Here's this innocent animal who has no idea that the lion is creeping up in the grass, getting ready to pounce. This is how Satan operates. And that's what this verse in 1 Peter is talking about. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. So every one of you in here, Satan has a dossier on. He's figuring out what your weakness is, because he wants to take you out. He's figuring out he knows what mine is. He wants to take me out. So as we go into the holidays, we have to be keenly aware of that. Loving the Lord our God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength also means being aware of our adversary. See, the one thing, this is a picture of a war room. We showed this a few weeks ago. Here's the thing about this. Satan has a war room. And just like God has one thing for us, from that verse in Mark 12, Satan has one thing for us also. Did you ever stop to think about that? That's kind of why the title today, One-on-One. There's one thing that God has for us. There's one thing that Satan has for us. He's plotting his movements against you, just like in this war room. Look over in Revelation chapter 12. Revelation 12. This verse is going to show you how Satan operates. This is how he operates. Revelation 12, verse 7. And Revelation is a very symbolic book. It has a lot of imagery in it. But one thing comes through. The basic message that God is trying to get to us comes through. So part of it, you read this and you wonder, what does this mean? But part of it is very, very easy to figure out. It says, "Now a war arose in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon. And the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was defeated,
and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent, who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. Look at this. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. This place where we live, the earth, is his last dominion. It's the only place he's allowed to be. He was kicked out of heaven, and he was put down here to make trouble for us for a time until God is basically finished and calls us all back. And so you wonder sometimes, why do I go through the troubles I go through? This is why. The master mover behind the scenes in this world is Satan. In verse 10, it says, "And I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, Now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come, for the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God." "And they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, for they loved not their lives even unto death. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to you, O earth and sea, for the devil has come down to you in great wrath, because he knows that his time is short." You know, there's one word in there that's kind of a key word. That word is accuser. One word that stands out. We're in this wrestling match with Satan, and Satan is the accuser. And there's another one that's kind of like it that I like. When Satan has a way to accuse you, that means he has leverage. You know, this is a picture of, where's Mike Mortale? He probably knows this. He's in class. Okay, that's too bad. He would know this guy. One of the guy on the right is Alexander Karelin. Alexander Karelin was a Russian wrestler, Greco-Roman wrestling. He was the greatest Russian wrestler in the history of wrestling, maybe the greatest of all time. He was called the Russian Bear. Other wrestlers were scared to death of him because he looked like a devil. I mean, he would intimidate you. I remember growing up watching him Olympics after Olympics. 4 years ago by, Alexander Karelin was there again. Another 4 years, the same one. Just defeating foe after foe. He won 887 wins. Wow. In 13 years running, he never gave up a single point during the match. Wow. So he didn't just win, he destroyed the other wrestlers. Wow. 13 years undefeated until the year 2000 when a U.S. wrestler named Rulon Gardner defeated Karelin. That was the first time he'd ever been defeated in his career. Wow. Won the gold medal that year. And then it wasn't long after that that Karelin retired. But what an amazing, Satan is a master wrestler. Part of wrestling is figuring out where the leverage is. And Karelin was the master at figuring out where the leverage was, and he had this patented move where he lifted up the other wrestler, got him off balance, and lifted him up over his head. Basically pinned him. Next move he made. But the leverage that Satan has with each one of us. I'm sorry, my voice is giving out. Is what we all need to be concerned about, and that's the other side of the one-on-one. It's not just about loving the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. But also this one. If you could push a button and remove one struggle from your life, what would it be? That's kind of a magical question to consider. Think about that. Every one of you in here right now is thinking of something that has dogged you all of your life, or has dogged you for a long time. It might be a sin, a weakness, a struggle with another person, a relationship issue. But every one of you in here has something. That is the leverage point that Satan is looking for. It just strikes me as funny. All the people I've met during my lifetime, every one of us has a leverage point. I have a leverage point. We all have one. And Satan uses that. And if we could ever figure out how we can push that button and remove that struggle, wouldn't that be a great day? That would free all of us up. Every one of us in here could be freed up. But God has actually given us a way to do that.
Amen.
Look over at James chapter 4. James chapter 4, verse 7. The answer is to submit. It says, submit yourselves then to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Come near to God, and he will come near to you. Wash your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. There's nothing that we suffer from, you see this verse, that cannot be overcome.
Amen.
Everything that we simply draw near to God. You know, if you don't get anything else out of today, what I hope we get going into the holidays is the goal that we have is what's simply stated in Mark 12, to love the Lord our God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. But the other one is, if I can focus on my leverage point and recognize it as a leverage point, and when I have that point, draw near to God. That's the exact opposite of what Satan is trying to get us to do. Satan wants us to draw away from God. Whenever we have a sin that overcomes us, what's the first thing we do? We run and hide. That's our first instinct, is to run and hide. But it says here basically, do the opposite. Go toward God. So in our one-on-one struggle, two things to remember again this holiday season. Mark 12:30. Love the Lord with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And then the second one, to remove Satan's leverage point in your life and focus on overcoming it by drawing near to God. And that's the match that we face for the next 2 weeks.
Amen.
Amen. Thank